In 1848, the most powerful empire on earth was on the brink of bankruptcy. Not from war, not from famine, but from a deadly addiction to a simple leaf. It was a thirst that sparked revolutions in America and drained Britain of its silver. To survive, the Crown didn't send an army. They sent a Scottish botanist on a suicide mission, deep into the forbidden heart of China. His target? To pull off the greatest corporate heist in human history. With 20,000 stolen plants, he shattered a global monopoly and shifted the balance of world power forever. This isn't just the history of a beverage. This is a story of espionage, revolution, and blood. Long before it was served in fine porcelain, long before it sparked wars and brought down empires, tea was simply a matter of survival. If you were to travel back 5,000 years, deep into the misty, impenetrable forests of Neolithic China, you wouldn't find tea ceremonies. You wouldn't find elegant teapots. You would find desperate people digging in the mud. In the ancient settlement of Tianluoshan, archaeologists unearthed the roots of the first tea plants. But these early humans didn't brew tea. They chewed the raw, bitter leaves to stave off hunger. Or they threw them into boiling clay pots over open fires, mixing them with ginger, onions, and salt to create a harsh, pungent, medicinal soup. It wasn't a relaxing beverage. It was fuel. It was medicine. It was a brutal remedy for a brutal world. But history always demands a better origin story. Humanity doesn't want to remember chewing on muddy leaves. We want myths. We want magic. Enter the mythical emperor Shen Nong, the divine farmer. The legend goes that in 2737 BC, the emperor was traveling across his vast domain. Obsessed with hygiene and medicine, he decreed that all drinking water must be boiled. One afternoon, while resting under a wild, ancient tree, a gentle breeze swept through the branches. A few stray leaves detached, floating down and landing perfectly into his cauldron of boiling water. The emperor watched as the water slowly turned a glowing amber color. An unfamiliar, rich aroma filled the air. Cautiously, he took a sip. It was warm. It was restorative. The world's first cup of tea was born. Not out of invention, but by a happy accident of nature. Shen Nong declared it a gift from the heavens, a liquid that could investigate the body and heal its ailments. Yet, there is a darker, more violent myth. Because religion, too, needed a story to explain this miraculous plant. Centuries later, a fierce Buddhist monk named Bodhidharma arrived in China. He was a man of extreme discipline. To prove his devotion, he sat facing the cold stone wall of a dark cave, vowing to meditate without sleep for 9 long years. For years, he sat in silence. But the flesh is weak. Eventually, exhaustion took hold. His eyes grew heavy. The darkness closed in. He fell asleep. When he awoke, Bodhidharma was consumed by absolute fury at his own weakness. He took a sharp blade, grabbed his own eyelids, and sliced them off. He threw the severed eyelids onto the cold cave floor, ensuring he could never close his eyes again. But a miracle happened. Where his bloody eyelids struck the earth, roots took hold. From the dark soil, the very first mystical tea shoots sprang up. A divine, caffeinated gift from the earth, designed specifically to keep monks awake during their endless hours of meditation in the dark. Myths aside, the real truth of tea was buried. Literally. Deep inside the ancient tombs of the Han dynasty, archaeologists broke through seals that had been closed for over 2,000 years. Inside the tomb of Emperor Jing-di, they discovered the oldest physical evidence of the leaf. But it didn't look like the tea we know today. It was compressed into hard, dusty bricks. These bricks were so valuable they were used as actual currency. You could buy a horse or a human life with a brick of tea. It was a luxury meant to accompany emperors into the afterlife. A sacred secret, guarded by the elite and recorded on ancient bamboo scrolls. For thousands of years, China kept this secret locked away behind its great walls. The leaf had conquered the East. It had transformed from a bitter survival soup into a sacred medicine, and finally into an elite currency. From these primitive, misty mountains, tea was preparing for its next evolution. It was about to become an art form. And soon, it would catch the greedy eyes of the outside world. By the time of the golden age of the Tang dynasty, tea had moved from the dirty clay pots of peasants to the lavish, silken halls of the imperial palace. But even then, the emperors were drinking something that would shock us today. Tea was still boiled into a thick, frothy soup, heavily seasoned with salt, onions, and even animal fat. It took a poet to elevate the leaf. A man named Lu Yu wrote The Classic of Tea, the very first book in human history dedicated entirely to brewing. He transformed tea from a crude, salty medicine into an elegant philosophy. By the Song dynasty, tea evolved once again. The elite abandoned the soup. Instead, they began grinding the leaves into a fine, vibrant green powder, whipping it into a thick froth. It was the ancient ancestor of what we now call matcha. But this luxury came at a terrible, hidden cost. To supply the demanding imperial court, millions of peasants were forced into crushing labor, pressing the tea into perfectly shaped, rock-hard tribute bricks. The tax burden was so heavy it threatened to break the empire. Until one man changed everything. Zhu Yuanzhang, a homeless, starving peasant who led a violent rebellion and rose to become the emperor of the Ming dynasty. Remembering the suffering of his own people, he outlawed the oppressive tea bricks. He decreed that from now on, tea must be kept loose, in its natural, uncompressed form. To preserve these loose leaves, poor farmers invented a radical new method: pan-firing the tea with bare hands in scorching hot iron woks. This single decree revolutionized the world forever. It gave birth to the loose-leaf teas we know today: black tea, green tea, and oolong. It required entirely new tools. It birthed the legendary Yixing clay teapots and delicate, translucent porcelain cups, designed specifically to show off the tea's natural, golden color. This new, refined culture swept across the ocean to Japan, capturing the hearts of the most violent and feared warriors on earth. the samurai. They created the sacred Japanese tea ceremony, an aesthetic so pure, so incredibly rigid, that making a mistake was a matter of life and death. The legendary tea master, Sen no Rikyu, perfected this art. But his immense influence threatened a powerful warlord. His punishment? He was ordered to commit ritual suicide, seppuku. Surrounded by his weeping disciples, Rikyu served one final, perfect cup of tea. Then he took his own life. Tea was no longer just a drink. It was a philosophy, and it was an honor worth dying for. For thousands of years, tea remained an absolute mystery to Europe, a mythical drink from an inaccessible land. But in 1662, everything changed. A Portuguese princess named Catherine of Braganza sailed to England to marry King Charles II. Packed securely deep inside her royal dowry was a chest of strange, dried leaves. Catherine loved tea, and when the Queen drank tea, the entire British royal court immediately followed. The elite quickly adopted the exotic, expensive beverage, but they found the Chinese brew too bitter. So they began adding milk and vast amounts of sugar harvested from brutal colonial plantations. An entirely new British ritual was born. Soon, the craze spilled out of the palaces and into the smoky, crowded coffeehouses of London. Demand exploded. The taxes placed on tea were so astronomically high that ruthless, violent smuggling rings formed, secretly moving chests of illegal tea along the dark, foggy English coastlines at midnight. But tea was about to do much more than just make merchants rich. It was about to save human history. As the Industrial Revolution roared to life, the skies over London turned pitch black with smog. Millions of poor workers were crammed into filthy, overcrowded slums, working brutal, bone-crushing shifts in the dark new factories. Disease was rampant. The city's drinking water was pumped straight from rivers heavily contaminated with human waste. Dysentery and cholera were sweeping through the slums like a plague, threatening to kill the workforce and completely collapse the Industrial Revolution. But then, a miracle happened. The workers suddenly stopped dying. Centuries later, modern economists finally discovered why. To make this new, cheap tea, the workers had to boil the water first. Without even knowing it, this simple act of boiling water killed the deadly bacteria. The warm, caffeinated, sugary tea gave the exhausted workers the calories and energy to survive their grueling factory shifts, and the boiled water kept them alive. It is a stunning historical truth. Tea didn't just fuel the Industrial Revolution, it literally saved it. By the 19th century, the British Empire was utterly addicted to tea, and the British East India Company controlled the trade. But there was a massive, crippling problem. China held an absolute, unbreakable monopoly. They were the only country on earth that grew tea, and they demanded to be paid entirely in solid silver. Britain was bleeding silver. They were literally going bankrupt just to fuel their daily tea addiction. The British realized they couldn't just buy tea anymore. They had to steal it. They hired Robert Fortune, a brilliant Scottish botanist. His mission was simple: infiltrate the Chinese Empire, steal the closely guarded secrets of tea, and smuggle the plants out. To do this, Fortune shaved his head, glued on a fake braided queue, and disguised himself as a wealthy Chinese merchant. He ventured deep into the forbidden Wu Yi Mountains, a place where no Westerner had ever set foot. If he was caught, he would be brutally tortured and executed. Inside the secret, heavily guarded tea factories, Fortune witnessed things the West never knew. He discovered that Chinese factory workers were secretly dyeing the green tea with Prussian blue and gypsum, literal toxic poison, simply because they knew the British preferred the bright, vibrant green colour. Over months of intense espionage, Fortune successfully stole over 20,000 tea seeds and live seedlings. He packed them into revolutionary glass terrariums called Wardian cases, miniature greenhouses designed to keep the plants alive during the long journey. He smuggled his stolen treasure onto a ship, surviving brutal typhoons and pirate attacks across the turbulent oceans. Fortune delivered the stolen plants to the Himalayas. There, the British planted them, creating the massive, endless tea plantations of India. In a single, ruthless heist, Robert Fortune broke China's 5,000-year monopoly. He shifted the global balance of economic power and handed the empire of tea to the West. While the British Empire was aggressively sailing the oceans to dominate the tea trade, the vast Russian Empire was quietly carving a brutal path through the ice. For over 200 years, thousands of massive camel caravans carried heavy, compressed tea bricks across the freezing, desolate wastes of Siberia. It was a treacherous, agonizing journey that took up to 16 grueling months to complete. To survive the freezing nights, the merchants huddled around crackling campfires, boiling their tea in large metal urns called samovars. The dense smoke from the fires naturally infused the tea leaves over the long journey, creating a distinct, heavy, smoky flavor that would become a cultural obsession across the vast Russian steppes. The leaf didn't just conquer the ice, it conquered the unforgiving desert. In Morocco and across North Africa, Chinese green tea was beautifully blended with massive amounts of fresh mint and sugar. Poured from high above to create a thick, cooling foam, it became the ultimate symbol of hospitality in a harsh, arid landscape. But perhaps the most dramatic modern transformation of tea happened much later, in the lush, rain-soaked mountains of the Black Sea. Following the devastating collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the newly founded Republic of Turkey faced a crippling economic crisis. Coffee, their historic and traditional drink, had become far too expensive to import. The young nation desperately needed a domestic alternative. Enter a visionary agricultural engineer named Zini Derin. Against all odds, he brought tea seeds to the incredibly steep, humid slopes of Riz. Within a few short decades, he ignited an absolute agricultural miracle. Turkey didn't just start growing tea, they completely redefined how it was consumed. Served steaming hot in the iconic, tulip-shaped ince belly glass, tea became the absolute, undeniable lifeblood of the Turkish people. Today, they proudly consume more tea per capita than any other nation on the face of the earth. Across the Atlantic Ocean, tea was making a very different kind of history. It became the violent spark that ignited a revolution. Outraged by unjust taxes imposed by the British Crown, furious American colonists disguised themselves, boarded British merchant ships, and dumped an entire fortune of East India Company tea directly into the freezing waters of Boston Harbor. The Boston Tea Party wasn't just a political protest, it was the explosive catalyst for the birth of the United States. As America grew, so did its obsession with speed, convenience, and industry. In 1904, during a sweltering, unbearable heatwave at the World's Fair, an incredibly desperate merchant decided to pour his hot tea over large blocks of ice, accidentally inventing iced tea, a refreshing drink that would spawn a multi-billion-dollar global industry. Just 4 years later, another American merchant named Thomas Sullivan was looking for a cheaper way to send delicate tea samples to his wealthy clients. Instead of using expensive, heavy metal tins, he packed the loose leaves into tiny, hand-sewn silk pouches. His clients completely misunderstood the instructions and simply dropped the entire silk pouch into boiling water. The modern tea bag was born. From a bitter, muddy survival soup in the ancient Neolithic forests of China to the lavish, delicate porcelain cups of imperial palaces. From the freezing, deadly caravans of Siberia to the bustling, modern cafes of our globally connected world. This simple, humble leaf has funded massive empires, fueled bloody, world-changing revolutions, and literally saved entire generations of workers from deadly disease. Today, it is the second most consumed liquid on the planet, surpassed only by water itself. The next time you hold a warm cup of tea in your hands, pause for a moment. Look deeply into the warm steam rising from the dark liquid. You are not just drinking a beverage, you are drinking 5,000 years of human history. Tea is much more than just a simple beverage. It is a perfect reflection of humanity itself. From the muddy, boiling waters of the Neolithic age to the refined, delicate porcelain cups of the British Empire, this humble leaf has silently witnessed our greatest triumphs and our darkest, most brutal hours. It is the leaf that launched massive armadas, funded global empires, and sparked violent revolutions. It connected the ancient East and the modern West long before the concepts of international trade or globalization even existed. The next time you brew a warm cup of tea, whether you serve it in a tiny, traditional ceramic pot, a beautiful glass, or simply steep it in a modern paper bag, take a moment to remember the ancient emperors, the ruthless spies, the daring smugglers, and the exhausted, coal-stained factory workers who made that very sip possible. You are not just drinking tea, you are drinking the story of the world. What is your favorite way to drink tea? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this epic journey through history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories from our past. Until next time,